Hi, Elaine.
Hi, Tanvi. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Well, welcome to SOM Consulting. We're really glad to have you here today. We're just going to dive right into a case.
Sure.
Awesome. So our client is a family-owned and operated apparel manufacturer named Top Rise. It has been in business for over 80 years and manufactures branded men's and women's knit clothing. This market is typically highly fragmented. All production occurs overseas, although Top Rise sells primarily to the US-based retailers. Top Rise management has approached us with the following issue. It is 2006 now, and they want to sell the business by 2008. They want to maximize the asking price by doubling the company's EBIT over the next 2 years. Our job is to determine if that goal is feasible.
Okay, great. So just to make sure I've got all the details right, our client is Top Rise, a family-owned apparel manufacturing company that has come to us with a goal of doubling their EBIT margin in 2 years, and they want us to figure out whether it's a feasible idea or not. I was just curious, so I'm not entirely sure what the apparel manufacturing industry looks like, so I'm just curious as to what the industry looks like and who their clients are. Who are they selling to today?
Yeah, so in terms of industry, so the apparel market is highly fragmented from a manufacturer's perspective, so that means that there's no one manufacturer that owns more than 5% of the market.
Okay, got it.
So that's important to know. In terms of their clients, so we will have clients like Gap, Old Navy, Fruit of the Loom, who will hire Top Rise to manufacture clothing for them.
Okay.
Yep. And then another thing I think is so they manufacture knit clothing. And so that includes all tops and bottoms made of raw materials consisting of cotton fleece or synthetic cotton blend. It does not include sweaters.
Oh, interesting. That was the first thing I thought of when you said knit clothing.
Oh, okay. I know, you'd never think that, so.
Yeah. Okay, great. So I think I have most of the information I need. If you could just give me a few moments to dive into a framework.
Yeah, no worries. Okay. All right, great. So here's broadly how I'm thinking about our client's problem. First, I would like to take a look at the broad industry that we're in, and then take a look at some of Top Rise's own characteristics, and then finally think about how we're going to have this achieve this growth that our client wants. So on the industry side, I think the first thing I would want to know more about is what does the apparel manufacturer sector look like? What is the growth rate today? How is the market size as a whole look? As well as what are the trends been over the past couple of years? And I think, especially given our client's goal, what does the profitability in the industry look like? Because that'll help inform us whether our client is doing better, worse, or
at the same rate as everybody else. The second thing I would want to look at is, given from the manufacturer's perspective, what do the clients look like? Because I think a lot of the industry is driven by the demand that we get from the clients. So is the demand growing today? And are the relationships with these clients commodity-based or relationship-based? Do they all buy from anybody who comes up with the same shirt, or are they looking for specific kinds that we can specialize in? And is there any trends and preferences the retail market is seeing? So based on what we're wearing, are trends changing, and are we keeping up with that? Specifically for TopRise, I think the first and most important thing will be to look at their current financial situation. Obviously, the revenue growth is very important, but I think even more important to understand is the EBIT margins currently, because that is exactly what we want to be focusing on in terms of improving the valuation for their sale later on. And also, like, given their different divisions, what are the trends in these divisions, so that we can think about which ones are dragging down the profit margins and which ones might be propping it up. And lastly, the cost structure. You mentioned that they have most of their production overseas, which leads me to think that most of their cost structure will be pretty lean already. But I think it's still a good part of the company that we should take a look at. The other thing I want to know about TopRise is like their product line. What kind of products do they sell today? Is it only the few things that we've discussed, or do they have some other accessories that we could tap into? And what are their relationships with their clients? As we discussed earlier, like, is that really a thing that we can leverage to double our EBIT margins? And then the third thing we want to talk about is the growth options that we have. I would think about this in terms of organic and inorganic. So from whatever we know about the industry and TopRise, we should be able to tell whether organic growth opportunities are present in the market. But if they're not, inorganically, can we acquire another firm or do a joint venture with another firm to be able to grow the EBIT to the rate that he requires?
Great. So you listed many things here and a lot of information that you want to know. I'll be curious to know what would be the top 2 or 3 items that you think would help lead to the answer the most.
So I think the top few things definitely are going to be understanding the industry and TopRise's own revenue growth and EBIT margins, because both of these will lead us to an answer about what the client, whether this is a feasible organic solution or not.
Great, thank you. So now the senior management team at TopRise is giving us the following metrics that represent the average for the total knit apparel manufacturing industry. Okay. That's what you just mentioned. So on the retailer side, in 2005, unit sales were 35 million units. Unit sales grew 6% from 2004 to 2005. Average unit retail is $120. Retailers make a 50% gross margin per unit. And on the manufacturer side, we have cost of goods sold per unit is $33, and SG&A per unit is $12. So go ahead and
$12.
Yeah.
Okay.
So go ahead and take a moment to examine the data and let me know what conclusions you come up with.
Sure. So I'm just wanted to clarify the first 3 numbers: the $35 million sales, $120 price, and the 50% margin are all on the retailer side. Is that right?
Exactly.
Okay. Great. So because that is different from what TopRise is today, so that means we need to think about what are TopRise's own pricing structures. So in order to get to that, I think first I will take a look at the 2 numbers about the retailer price as well as the retailer's gross margin. So if they have $120 as their final price and they're making a gross margin, that means they're buying the product from companies like TopRise at 50%, which is $60. And so $60 is the price that TopRise is selling at. Okay, so that helps us to get to more of TopRise's own financials. Now, looking at their cost structure, we're looking at a COGS of 33 and SGN of 12. So that's a total cost of $45, which means our EBIT margin, and here when I talk about EBIT, I'm going to include the assumption that COGS and SGN are kind of the only costs that we need to consider.
That's correct.
So then we're looking at a total EBIT margin, so EBIT of $15 per unit, which is actually roughly 25% of the actual sales that we make. And just to be complete, if we could also extend this out to what is their EBIT as a whole, I think that's going to be basically $15 times the 35 million sales that they make. But I think 35 million is the number of units sold?
For the
retailers.
For the entire retailers, yes.
Okay, but $35 million is not the units sold by TopRise, so
yeah.
let's leave that out for now. That'll give us the industry total. But I think for now, what's important is to understand that the industry as a whole, the manufacturing industry as a whole, has an EBIT margin of 25%, which seems like a fairly high amount. I never imagined that the squeezed manufacturing industry would make that much of a margin. It seems like a pretty good number. What's interesting to me, though, is that you mentioned they also have only a 6% growth rate, and given our clients wish to double their EBIT, this doesn't seem like a very promising space. But I might be wrong. It depends on whether within the industry, if our client is growing, because if he is somebody who's had a exponential growth over the past couple of years and can maintain that, we might still be able to achieve this within this steady growth industry too.
Yep, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Great. So now that we have the overall industry, and I think your analysis made a lot of sense, particularly pointing out, again, the 6% that was low. So we have some metrics that will help you form TopRise.
Okay.
So we have numbers from 2004 and 2005.
Okay.
The revenue, COGS, and SG&A.
Revenue, COGS. And this is all for TopRise specifically?
Yes, just for TopRise. So for 2004, the revenue was $565 million. These are all in millions.
Okay.
310 for COGS and 113 for SG&A.
Okay.
For 2005, it's 600 for revenue.
Okay.
330 for COGS and 120 for SG&A.
Okay.
So I'd love to know, what does this tell you?
All right, great. So I think there's a few things that I would want to test compared to the industry. So I think the first and probably the most important is the EBIT margin. So we want to know whether TopRise is doing as well as everyone else in the industry. So to calculate that, I'm going to compare with the 2005 numbers, because that's what we did for the industry. You said 330 million? Is that right?
Yeah, 330.
Okay. So actually these numbers look kind of identical to what we have already. So that gives me a cost structure of 450 million and a total EBIT of 150 million. So the margin that we get is again 25%. So it looks like TopRise is exactly in line with the industry in terms of the EBIT margins that they have. And then the second thing I want to test is the 6% growth rate assumption. As I said just now, if our client is growing at an exponential rate, then this could be still feasible within this industry. So just to calculate that out, I'm going to take a delta between 2004 and 2005. So we're looking at 600 minus 565 divided by 565, which, do you mind if I round a little bit?
Go ahead, yeah.
Okay, so 35 divided by 565, I'm going to say it's roughly around 30 divided by 5 or 6, 5 to 6, which is actually almost 6%, probably a little higher than 6%, but not a very significant difference, which makes me think that I think TopRise has probably kind of reached its stable growth rate and is just following the industry at this point. What else could this data tell us? Oh, one other thing that we could find out from the data is, given the whole industry data versus where TopRise's own revenues are at, we might be able to come up with a market share number for TopRise. So we know that our total revenues are 600 million, and we know the total manufacturer revenues, when we take into account the price of $60 and the number of units sold of $35 million, is going to be, let's see, this should be 10 over 35. If you don't mind me rounding again, it's going to be roughly around a third of the market. Which I think is striking, given the fact that you mentioned the manufacturing industry is quite fragmented. I mean, a third of the market share in a fragmented market is quite a large share, and while it might be possible for them to grow quite a bit by either encroaching upon the other 2/3 of the market or by buying up some of these players, I still think that within this industry we might be at a little bit of a standstill in terms of doubling our EBIT. I mean, that basically would require us to grow the EBIT, or keeping the EBIT margins the same. That would require us to double revenues, which is a little bit hard. One other thing I could think about in this, and this is going back to my initial framework where we talked about the revenue and EBIT margins, but also to think about the cost structure, is how, or if it is at all feasible to double the EBIT by reducing costs. So I don't know, do we have any information about whether this 450 million of total costs is...
Well, I'd love to hear, can you do some brainstorming around ideas of which we could recommend our clients reduce costs?
Okay, sure. So I know, so like, it looks like right now COGS and SG&A have a roughly 330 and 120 million. So a total of 450 million costs, and in order to achieve our goal, given the current profit margin, given the current profit EBIT that we have, which is 150 million, would require us to lower costs by a third. Because to get it down from 450 to 300 million would require us to cut costs by a third. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, this might be a little bit hard, but just if we were to brainstorm about how we could do this, I think some of the ideas, and I'm going to split this into thinking about how we could lower costs on COGS and SG&A. On COGS, we could think about, in addition to the outsourcing that we're doing, we could think about cheaper materials. So maybe the countries that we have outsourced to have cheap labor but not cheap materials, or vice versa, like countries that have cheaper labor. Maybe it would increase the shipping costs a little bit to move the labor from, to move the materials from a cheap material to a cheap labor country. But you know, it could be done. Another thing that we could think about is, in terms of the costs, within cost of goods sold, there's also a lot of high amount of cost that comes with the shipping. And if we could, for example, think about some bulk discounts by consolidating our factories, and if we could also on the COGS side improve logistics. So if we are as big as we are right now, which is a third of the industry, maybe we have a very widespread set of warehouses and sales offices and stores that are taking care of all of these shipments. So maybe there's a way to streamline that a little bit and improve logistics to reduce costs. On the SG&A side, I think I'd be curious to see what our marketing and administrative spends are like. I think on the marketing side, if we can think about, I'm just off the top of my head, I don't know any apparel manufacturer that does any marketing. So maybe it's just a matter of just building client relationships and sales. So maybe marketing is less relevant than sales. So just looking at a sales team and how effective they're being, maybe there's some ways of streamlining their effectiveness as well. But overall, as I'm going through this brainstorming, I don't see how these small incremental items will lead to a third of the costs getting cut. It seems pretty hard to do, especially given that we are in line with the industry profit margins right now.
Yeah, can you give me one more idea for COGS?
On the COGS side, let me think. So if we're thinking about the cost of goods sold, what else goes into the... one part is also, I'd be curious to see whether the factories that we're using, are they owned by us, leased by us? Are we paying rental costs for these, utility costs? If there's a way to actually have, I don't know which is cheaper because I don't have enough knowledge about the industry, but if we're leasing them and if it's actually cheaper to own them and run them, then maybe we should consider changing that buy versus lease model up.
Great. Wonderful. And you're right. Yeah, we don't have any information on costs.
Yeah.
And to your point, a third sounds like a lot to decrease.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear your thoughts. So sounds like the organic's not going to work, cost's not going to work. What do you think we should explore next? Okay, so in terms of other growth options, I think I have this this one way that we could think about this is in terms of this matrix of our customers versus our products. So in order to grow the business, typically we can think about our existing customers versus new customers and existing products versus new products. So in terms of within the existing customers and existing products, we could think about what are the ways that we could sell what we currently produce to more of our clients. And I think that's the part we've come to a little bit of a standstill because we're already a big player. So I think it'll be a little bit harder. But if I had to think about some anyway, like bulk discounts, given our size, we might have the clout to actually not force, but
convince our clients, to buy more from us rather than the other smaller manufacturers that they may have. But thinking about the other things in this matrix, I think we can also think about how we could sell new products to our existing customers. So in terms of what we already make today, I know it's knit clothing, which is tops and bottoms in a certain kind of material. So we could either think about making other products. So maybe like we could go into sweatshirts or warmer clothing, which is still made with fleece and cotton and meant for like the warmer climate in the US. So like other kinds of clothes. Right now, you also mentioned we're only doing men and women's clothing. So we could think about like clothing for babies or kids who have their own kind of set of, and actually it's probably like a higher growth industry given that more people are having kids today. And then in terms of other new products, maybe it doesn't have to be, given we have already the expertise to make clothing, we could change up which materials we use. So maybe we could think about using wool or polyester or rayon or other materials in the industry. And the other part of this matrix is also thinking about the existing products to new customers. So we already know that we are selling to manufacturers in the US, based in the US. And knowing the kind of companies, the customers you mentioned, like a Gap, Old Navy, these are big names even abroad. So we could think about actually reaching out to other retailers outside of the country. So retailers in other geographical areas that could potentially be interested in buying the same material that Old Navy and Gap buy. Like I think that's a pretty good sell to many countries, assuming we can meet their cost demands. But yeah, retailers in other countries would be a good place. Where else could we find new customers? Maybe there are some other retailers that we haven't tapped into yet, maybe in the luxury segment, because we do mostly cotton and fleece. So in the luxury segment, I'm not entirely sure without doing a market study about where the feasibility will lie. But I think there is some chances to find new customers within the US as well if we're not too keen to expand abroad. And I think in this matrix, like the new customers to new products to new customers tends to be the hardest. So
yeah, you have
I think
a lot of ideas.
Yeah, that could go a bit wild.
Can you give me like one idea and then we'll move on?
Okay, so I think if we were to especially think about producing clothes in other new products in different materials, we could really think about how that could expand to other countries, because I think cotton and fleece are materials that are very often used here. But if we were to go into wool, for example, I could think that Canada would be a great new market to enter into, close by, but they definitely need more woolen clothing than we do.
Yes.
So you could combine, like you could play around with a few of these combinations to come up with some new ideas there as well.
Wonderful. Well, so our senior management has collected data on this exact thing that you're just brainstorming. And so let me the data is representative of the entire market within these categories. So here's what we have.
Okay, so we're looking at basically the market for 3 new categories that we don't have. So we're like thinking about new products at this point. We're looking at kids and baby knits. Oh yay, kids. Knit accessories. Okay, so that's not exactly clothing. And then sweaters, which is what I thought this industry has, but it doesn't. Okay, so we're basically looking at the retail as well as the manufacturing data for these three new product lines. I think what's interesting to me is that within these 3, like knit accessories seems to have a really high number of sales per unit sales, even though it's the smallest amount of retail amount, which makes sense because they're smaller than just clothing. And then I think I would like to focus a little bit on the manufacturing EBIT, because that's the most relevant figure for us as a manufacturing company. And we're looking at basically, even within this structure, like the knit accessories has the biggest kind of overall dollar value in terms of market size, followed by the baby knits and the sweaters. But I think before we like make a decision on which of these will be the best for our client to pursue, I think it's also important to again go back to the cost structure, because each of these requires a slightly different expertise. Like kids and baby knits, maybe a little bit easier because you're kind of just shrinking down big people's clothing. But like accessories and sweaters both seem like they require very new expertise and capabilities that we may or may not have. So I'd be curious to understand if our management team thinks that they can expand into all of these reasonably quickly, first of all, because 2 years is a small turnaround time. time, and also reasonably cheaply because we don't want to eat into too much of our cost structure already.
I'd love to hear your thoughts. You mentioned like overall costs. Can you name maybe 3 specific costs you think would be something that they should consider when entering these different types of product lines?
Sure. So I think the first thing will be to think about we don't currently have an understanding of what the demand or the customer preferences of the ultimate customer for each of these categories is. We do for knit clothing, so we know like what kind of colors are in season, we know what kind of sizes, shapes are in season. But knit accessories, baby knits and sweaters, like they're fundamentally different categories. So I think firstly we would need to spend some time and money to understand what our retail clients want in each of these spaces. I think the second thing would be very important is also to understand the sourcing of the materials. So I think for kids and baby knits as well as knit accessories, this might be relatively easy, but for sweaters, for example, we'd have to go on a whole like procurement like study to understand which is the best place to find these, especially given our lean cost structure. We want to keep it lean for this one as well. So to understand where to procure the materials from. And lastly is just the changes to the factories required. So our factories are currently created or like the workers are deal with a certain type of clothing. So how much ramp up time will they need and how much training dollars do we need to spend to ensure that they can produce these within the next 2 years?
Great, thank you. Well, Top Rise has told us that they could do all 3 of these without any additional cost. So you just said won't matter for our clients. So given that, what are your thoughts in terms of which product line should they enter into?
Sure, I mean, that's great news. Very capable clients we have that explains why they've had it for 80 years and been doing so well in the industry. But I think, okay, given those details, I think I would like to go back to our original target number of 150 million of the EBIT. That, like, if they want to double, I'm gonna for now discount the 6% growth rate. I think that's like it'll just complicate the numbers a little bit.
That's fair, yeah.
But just think about like if we want to double it from 150 to 300 million in 2 years. I think what is important is to understand how that number fits in within the context of each of these industries. Because if I'm looking at these numbers, the sweaters is only 380 million, which means we would basically need to capture about 40% of this market to be able to actually achieve our goal, which, given that we're a new player, might be a little bit hard. Whereas compared to like kids, which is 150 out of 72 million, so about 20%, and as opposed to knit accessories, which would require about 150 out of 1.4 150 million out of 1.4 billion is roughly about 11%. And just like looking at that, I think 11% seems like the most doable to me, especially given the short time frame of 2 years. And then it also has like a fairly it has a growth rate that's in line with what we're already doing. So I think if we manage to get a toehold of 11% in this industry, it'll make us a very attractive target to whoever wants to buy, and therefore be able to get the right valuation for our clients.
Great. Well, we've talked about a lot of things, so can you summarize what we've talked about today for our client?
Sure. Okay, great. So I think we definitely recommend that you expand your product line and consider going into the knit accessories business. The reason we recommend this is firstly because the current industry you're in of the knit clothing for men and women is pretty stable, but not a very high growth industry. Even though your profit margins of 25% are exactly in line with the industry, there is not much more room to double your EBIT within this space. And secondly, because the knit accessories industry is really big, and as we've talked to your teams, we know that you won't have too much trouble expanding into that space in a short amount of time while still keeping your cost structure low. While we're doing this, I think we should be wary about a little bit is that the knit accessories industry is fundamentally different from what we've been selling so far. So you might want to spend some time thinking about what are the demands of the customer and what do our retailers really want. But I think if you can do that, especially if you can work with retailers that are already clients, we're such a big player in the market that we definitely have great relationships with these retailers, and we should be able to use that to help us build the business that much faster. Yeah, sure. So I think our client should think about expanding into the knit accessories. No, they wouldn't usually do that. Okay, ask again. Okay, one second. Let me just like, spread out the papers. We can just keep this with you. Okay.
Great. So what would you recommend for our clients?
Sure. So I think we've looked at a lot of things. We first looked at the industry that we were working in, and we see that it has a 6% growth and like a 20% profit margin. And then we also looked at TopRise's own numbers, and we found that you also have a 6% growth and a 25% top margin. And I think based on that, like it seems like organic growth is like a little bit hard. So we also looked at the cost structure, but even within the cost structure, you have to cut it by a third, which is also quite hard. So I think based on that, we explored some of the new things that we could do in terms of either new products or new customers. And I think we found is that new customers new products are probably the best way to go. And within that, we looked at 3 different kinds of products that you could manufacture, and the net accessory seems like the most promising right now.
Great. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.